It's really my pleasure to introduce my great friend Yuri Herrera from Mexico City, grew up from Mexico. He was born in Actopan, Hidalgo in 1970, studied Poli-Sci at UNAM, got his MFA at the University of El Paso, UTEC, a PhD at Berkeley in Hispanic Language and Literature. He gives classes now in the Spanish department, right, at Tulane. He's published 3 novels and 2 children's books. These novels have won, among many other prizes, the prize for the best work of fiction of borderland fiction, which is called the Border of Words Prize, the best novel published in Spain in 2009 for Kingdom Come, the Anna Seegers Prize in Germany for all his work in 2016, the Best Translated Book Award here in the U.S. For him and his translator, Lisa Dillman, for Science Preceding the End of the World. The 3 books are Kingdom Come, which is the first of the novels, but it's just out now in Spanish and English, Science Preceding the End of the World, and The Transmigration of Bodies. This trio of books has really transformed the way people think about the possibilities of the novel in Mexico, and of course throughout Latin America and in so many other parts of the world. But their impact in Mexico was especially explosive. After a decade or so of young writers trying to make their names internationally by writing as if they were from any place on earth other than Mexico, the cataclysmic violence and political crises that have beset Mexico, and perhaps the international clamor over the Mexican novels of Roberto Bolaño, who in his works took on various facets of those realities with a genius and ferocity that no Mexican had shown in the half a century, if ever, inspired many young Mexican writers to again engage their national realities through fiction. To be admittedly reductive about it, this triggered an onslaught of genre and pseudo-journalistic works, popularly known as narconovelas, that for the most part told us nothing about contemporary Mexico, that the country's many good and heroic journalists weren't already telling us with much more skill and authority. Then Yuri Herrera came along to remind us of how great fiction always reinvents the world anew and returns us to reading fiction with the astonishment of a child, combined with a rigorous adult experience of literary mastery, of serious play, of reality poetically transformed, of deep thinking and feeling expressed in narrative. The atmosphere of Mexican violence, crime, corruption, poverty, flight, fear, ever-present death are in these 3 novels without ever being explicitly named as such, because they take place somewhere else, in a verbal reality that feels contemporary and ancient, and also as if it might come from out of space all at once, with echoes of the greatest Mexican prose stylist and fabulist before Yuri, Juan Rulfo, and of Italo Calvino too, and of Raymond Chandler and Rafael Bernal in medieval mystery plays and Shakespeare all at once. He gives you the impression of a giant, omnivorous, genius beast of a novelist who somehow produces novels as slender and sharp and magical as an elfish dagger forged in Gondolin. Is David Rose in here? Yeah. I think this is what another extremely gifted Mexican novelist, Valeria Luiselli, wrote about Yuri. It was definitely my favorite blurb that I've ever read. Yuri Herrera, the blurbs are just the worst pieces of garbage ever, but this is a blurb that's like true poetry. Yuri Herrera must be 1,000 years old. He must have traveled to hell and heaven and back again. He must have once been a girl, an animal, a rock, a boy, and a woman. Nothing else explains the vastness of his understanding. It's my great pleasure to introduce one of my really great friends in life, longtime Mexico City drinking partner, Yuri Herrera.
Thank you very much. Francisco is always extremely generous with me, but today he said one of the things that I'm really going to cherish. He says that it sounds like the words came from outer space, because that's one of the things that I always think that we should try to talk about reality as if we were just discovering the planet. And as usual, Francisco put it in the best way possible. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Thank you for Trinity for having me again. I remember last time I was here, we were here with Martin Solares and with, what's her name, the friend poet, with Monica de la Torre. And I was telling yesterday, Diana and Ethan, that one of my nightmares that I thought are all only happening nightmares happened to me last time, which is I always say, what if I need to go to a bathroom in the middle of a lecture? And that actually happened to me last time, but luckily it was three of us, so maybe it wasn't that apparent. But anyway, today I haven't drank water like in 4 hours, just to be sure that it won't happen again. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my books, and I'm going to read a little bit about Kingdom Comes. Kingdom Comes is my first published novel, but it's the most recent one appearing in English. It just appeared a few months ago in English. I wrote it. First of all, I have to say it's my first published novel, but it's not the first novel that I wrote. This is important to say because sometimes people like to say like, oh, I just wrote it and it came out of me like in one night and it was perfect and whatever. Before this, I wrote like 3 books that for different reasons were not published. Either I didn't want or nobody else wanted to publish them, and I think that was good because I owed those first books all my learning, all the things that made it possible for me to finally write this one and to publish it. And before writing it, I had been for a year in France. I was teaching in a public high school in Orleans, in France, and which is a very beautiful, incredibly boring city. And after finishing that, I didn't know really what to do. And a friend who had visited El Paso told me, why don't you do an MFA in this place that nobody wants to go, but apparently there's this really interesting program. So I applied, and I still not sure why they accepted me, because I recently saw at my application it was really naive. It was pretty simple, but anyway, they accepted me. And El Paso is, I would say, the border between El Paso and Ciudad Juarez is one of the most interesting places where I have been in my life. It's when I got there, I remember my first feeling that it was 2 different versions of hell. And the American version is like like full of policemen, full of cameras. Like there's a big DEA station, there's a big FBI station, there's an army base, and it's like neurotically organized. It's boring. It's strange. And the Mexican side is the exact opposite, apparently, because it's like it's dangerous and sometimes it's fun and it's filthy. But then you realize that the whole point of the border is to try to keep moving in between these 2 realities that build one single reality, and that this is a reality that's all the time challenging you. So this is one of the most important things this was one of the most important things for me during this time. In the program in El Paso, I had a lot of time to write, but also when I was not writing or when I was not drinking, which is what people do in this program, especially in this place in the border, I was trying to understand this really complex phenomenon, because the border is, I always say, like a laboratory of identities, a linguistic laboratory, a laboratory of political practices. It's a place where things are being challenged all the time. It was there when I had already put behind me the previous books. The very last one that I had tried to write was a story about becoming young adult, and it's the kind of story that you think that it's gonna be interesting to everyone because those stories are really interesting to you. How you discover sex, how you discover drinking, how you discover friendship, and of course all these can be interesting stories, but you have to turn them into art. They are not in itself interesting. So I was thinking about what was going to be my next story, and there was this topic that had always been interesting to me for different reasons, which was the relationship between power and art. It has been very important for me for different reasons. I come from a family where the political activism and political participation was really important since I was a child. And also art was all the time present, and there is a tension. And also when I studied political science, I was aware of this tension in institutional terms, and specifically in Mexico, the way artists relate to the state and the way that the state has instruments to try to control art. So I was thinking about this, and I remember thinking that the model that I liked to try to understand this was the model of the European artists that were working in the courts, that they would be working for the pleasure of kings, and these kings very often were ignorant douchebags, but still these guys, these artists, managed to create their own voice and to create some work that was not just dependent on the will of these powerful people, and that was a topic that was really interesting for me. But I knew that I didn't want to write a novel that took place in 17th century France, to say something. And I remember being in Ciudad Juarez, because I was studying El Paso, but I spent a lot of my time in Ciudad Juarez. And I said, of course, this is it. This is the place where I have to play it, to place the story. Because here we have different kinds of power, and we have a lot of people making a commentary of power, or resisting power, or being an accomplice to this kind of power, because you have the state power, and you have the power of the criminals, and you have the power of the maquiladoras, the economic powers. And I said, it's everything here. And once I understood that, everything else started like falling into place. The landscape where this was going to happen, the characters that were going to happen in this story, the language, and I'm just saying this as different aspects, just let's say for academic purposes, but this is something that came to me like in an organic way. So I started writing it, but I had thought about it for a long time. I have had this inside me at least for a couple of years. So in terms of writing, this came up sort of fast, like in 6 months, seven months maybe. But I have been taking a lot of notes for a long time. So I was this was like the pre-writing period of a book is like maybe for me some of it's like the most important part of the process, when you start like letting the ideas ferment in your brain. Anyway, so I'm gonna finish soon with this introduction. Just wanted to say something. For the first 4 years of life of this book, it was received with a really distinguished silence by the critics everywhere, and so that was really consistent. And then it was published in Spain by this small publisher. It was their first 2 or 3 months of life, And they got interested, and I said yes. And they said we don't have a lot of money. I said I don't care, just publish it. But the director of the publishing house, Julian Rodriguez, is a very respected writer there. So the other writers and critics paid attention to what Periférico was publishing. And in the first months of life of the novel in Spain, it received something like 30 reviews. So it was a really big change. And also, during this time, the problem of organized crime in Mexico had become from being a very important issue to being the most important issue. And a lot of people started reading the novel as a way of trying to understand this. So a while after that, a publisher bought the rights for the English language. So this was the first novel to be translated into English. But eventually he decided that he didn't want to publish it. And this other publisher, small publisher, and other stories said, we want it. But I said, okay, but we have to keep the same translation, because I have been working for a long time with the translator, who is a great intellectual and a great artist. I said Lisa Dillman, who teaches translation at Emory in Atlanta. So they said, okay, and but they decided to publish first the other two novels. So I tried to make it short, maybe it was long, but that's the story of how Kingdom Comes came to be published. Now, the irony of this is that when I was looking for my copy of Kingdom Comes in English, I realized that I had given away all the copies that I had in English, and the only one that I found is the Australian edition, so which my British publisher would probably kill me for doing this, but this is the one. It's exactly the same translation, but anyway. So I'm going to read a little bit about it, and then we can talk also. I heard that in a couple of courses, and I really appreciate you doing this. My second novel, Science Preceding the End of the World, has been read. So also, if you want to talk about it, I'm totally fine with that. But I'm going to read just a few chapters. So I'm going to start with the first chapter. He knew blood, and could see this man was different. Could see it in the way he filled the space, with no urgency, and an all-knowing air, as though made of finer threads. Other blood. The man took a seat at a table, and his attendants fanned out in a semicircle behind him. Lobo admired him in the waning light of the day that filtered in through a small window on the wall. He had never had these people close, but was sure he'd seen this scene before. The respect this man and his companions inspired in him had been set out somewhere. The sudden sense of importance he got on finding himself so close. He recognized the way the man sat, the lofty look, the glimmer. Then he saw the jewels that graced him and knew he was a king. The one time Lobo had gone to the pictures, he saw a movie with a man like this, strong, sumptuous, dominating the things of the world. He was a king, and around him everything became meaningful. Men gave their lives for him. Women gave birth for him. He protected and bestowed, and in the kingdom, through his grace, each and every subject had a precise place. But those accompanying this king were more than vassals. This was his court. Lobo felt envy, the bad kind first and the good kind after, because suddenly he saw that this was the most important day of his life. Never before had he been near one of those who gave life meaning, made it all tally up. Never even had the hope. Ever since his parents had brought him here from who knows where and then abandoned him to his fate, life had been a counting of days of dust and sun. A voice thick with phlegm distracted his gaze from the king, a drunk ordering him to sing. Lobo complied, effortlessly at first, stood trembling with excitement, but soon, from the same, he sang like never before. pulling words out from inside as though pronouncing them for the first time, as though overcome by the ecstasy of having happened upon them. He felt the king's eyes on his back, and the cantina fall silent. People put their dominoes face down on tables to listen. He sang a song, and the drunk demanded another, and then another, and another, and another. And with each one, Lobo sang more inspired, and then the drunk got more drunk. At times he joined in, at times he spat into the sawdust and laughed with the old soak there with him. Finally he said, "Okay," and Lobo held out his hand. The drunk paid, and Lobo saw it was short, and held out his hand one more. "That's it, songbird. What I got left is for one more shot. Just thank your sense you got that much." Lobo was used to it. These things happened. And he was about to turn away in what can you do resignation when he heard from behind, "Pay the artist." Lobo turned to see the king holding the drunk in his gaze. He said it calm. It was a simple order, but the man didn't know enough to stop. "What artist?" he said. "Only thing I see here is this fool, and I already paid him." "Don't get smart, friend." The king's voice hardened. "Pay him and shut it." The drunk got up and staggered to the king's table. His men went on alert, but the king sat unfluttered. The drunk struggled to focus and then said, "I know you. I heard what they say." "That a fact? And what do they say?" The drunk laughed, clumsily scratched a cheek. "Nah, not your business I'm talking about. Everybody knows about that." "Talking about the other." And he laughed once more. The king's face clouded. He tilted his head back, got up, signaled his entourage to stay put, approached the drunk, and grabbed him by the chin. The man tried to twist free. No luck. The king put his lips to the drunk's ear and said, "Actually, I don't think you heard a thing. You know why? Because dead men have very poor hearing." The king put his gun to him as though feeling the man's gut and fired. A simple shot. Nonchalant. The drunk opened his eyes wide, tried to steady himself on a table, slipped and fell. The king turned to the boozer with him. "You got something to say too?" The man snatched his hat and fled. "Hands high, I didn't see a thing." The king bent over the corpse, rifled through a pocket, pulled out a wad of bills. He peeled off a few, handed them to Lobo, replaced the rest. "Artist, take your due," he said. Lobo took the bills without looking down. He was staring at the king, drinking him in, and kept watching as the king signaled his crew and they fled slowly out of the cantina. Lobo gazed at the swinging doors and thought that from now on there was a new reason why calendars were senseless. No date meant a thing besides this one, because finally he'd found his place in the world, and because he'd heard something about a secret which he damn well wanted to keep. Dust and sun. Silence. A sorry house where no one exchanged words. His parents a couple of strays who got lost in the same corner, nothing to say to each other. That was why the words started to pile up, first in Lobo's mouth and then in his hands. For him school was brief, a place where he sensed the harmony of letters, the rhythms that strung them together and split them apart. It was a private discovery, since he couldn't see the lines on the chalkboard clearly, and the teacher took him for a fool. And he confined himself to the solitude of his notebook. And it was out of sheer passion that he mastered the ways of syllables and accents before being ordered to earn his keep on the street, offering rhymes in exchange for pity, for coins. The street was hostile territory, a muffled struggle whose rules made no sense. He managed to endure it by repeating sweet refrains in his head and inhabiting the world through its public words, posters, paper sold on street corners, signs. These were his antidote to chaos. He'd stop on the sidewalk and run his eyes again and again over any random string of words to forget the fierce environs around him. One day, his father put the accordion in his hands, coldly, as though instructing him on how to unjam a door. He taught Lobo to combine the chord buttons on the left with the basses on the right, how the bellows trap and release air to shape the sounds. Now hold it good, he said. This is your breath. The next day, his father went to the other side. They waited in vain. Then his mother crossed without so much as a promise of return. They left him the accordion so he could make his way in the cantinas, and it was there he learned that while boleros can get by with a sweet face, corridos require bravado and acting out the story as you sing. He also learned the following truths. Life is a matter of time and hardship. There is a God who says, deal with it, because this is the way it is. And perhaps the most important, steer clear of a man about to vomit. He never took notice of the calendar. It seemed absurd, because days were all alike. Do the rounds of the tables, offer songs, hold out your hand. Fill your pockets with change. Dates earned a name only when someone took pity on themselves or another by pulling out steel and shortening the weight. Or when Lobo discovered hairs cropping up, or things getting bigger on his body at will. Or when pain hacksaw his skull and struck him down for hours at a time. Endings and eccentricities were the most notable way to order time. That's how he spent it. That and learning blood. He could detect its curdle in the parasites who said, come, little boy, and invited him into a corner. The way it congealed in the veins of fraidy cats who smiled for no reason. The way it turned to water in the bodies of those who played the same hurricane of the jukebox over and over again. The way it dried out like a stone in low lives, just aching to throw down. Every night Lobo went back to the place where he boxed down to stare at the cardboard and feel his words grow. He started writing songs about stuff that happened to others. He knew nothing of love, but he'd heard stories. So he'd mention it amid wisdom and proverbs, give it a beat, and sell it. But it was all imitation, a mirror held up to lives overheard. And though he suspected there was more he could do with his songs, he didn't know how to go deeper. It had all been said before. Why bother? All he could do was wait, carry on and wait. For what? A miracle. So then the miracle came, which is when he met the king. And with the king, he meets all these people that are around him. And all these people organize their lives in terms of how they can serve the boss. And one of these is a journalist. It's a journalist who is in charge of just creating truths for this boss. But the journalist also understands that Lobo, the artist, has something else, that he is something else. So he gives him some books. He gives him some books that, well, are not mentioned which books are here, but when I was writing I knew that they were poetry books. So there is this chapter which is a little bit what is happening inside Lobo's head after reading poetry, actual poetry, for the first time. They are there. So many letters together. His. Put there for no reason but to penetrate his brain. They are there. Milling the sheets between rolls of insomnia, they signal, scratching at the wasted white of the paper, at his eyes. And what was each sheet if not a working tool, like a saw for someone who builds tables, a gat for someone who takes lives? Ah, but never this bluff of sand, the spirit and ambition to uncover. So many letters there. They are. There they are. They are a glimmer, how they jostle together and overflow, soaking each other and enveloping his eyes in an uproar of reasons. No matter if they are perfect, or unruly, they incriminate, fearing disarray words, so many words, his, an uproar of signs bound together. They are a constant light, there, they are. Books were something he already knew about, but they had spurned him, like an unwelcoming country. And now he'd let himself be led by the hand to the council of secrets, a constant light, each with its own radiance, each speaking the true name in its own way, even the most false, even the most fickle. Aha, no, not just there to penetrate his brain. There, they are a constant light, the way to other boxes far away, the road to ears hidden right here, like the box that bite him. No, not just there to amuse his eyes or entertain his ear. They are a constant light. They are the lighthouse flare cast over stones at his command. They are a lantern that searches, then stops and caresses the earth, and they show him the way to make the most of the service that is his to render. So, further ahead, he has been working for this guy for a while. He has been writing songs about him. He has been writing songs about the people around him. And at some point he learns that what we would call the mainstream media don't want to play the songs that he has been composing. And this is the scene. They didn't want his songs. Jockeys at the station said his words were coarse, his good guys were bad. Or they said yes but no. They liked the lyrics but had orders to shut his groove down. It wasn't the artisan buttery voice. He'd only recorded one little tune. Other singers, finer voices, were tasked with giving his songs a smoother sound. One of the DJs said to the journalist, "Hey, between you and me, the Supreme G is turning the screws right these days. A show for the gringos. Temporary hush-hush till the advertisers cool down. Couldn't he ask the artist to clean it up a little? Write sweeter songs? Less crude?" "Don't look at me," said the journalist. "I'm just letting you know. And now I'm taking you to Senor so we can figure out what to do about this. He'll be free in a minute." So they didn't want him, thought the artist. So he was chump change for the big money men. So he made their ears itch. He'd been insulted 100 times before. Only this time, he wasn't humiliated. He swaggered, felt superior. He clenched his jaw and suddenly could see it all clearly. It was the rejection of others that defined him. Shit. So what if his singing pained them? In the end, what the artist enjoyed was gazing into the eyes of his audience, bringing their bones to life on the dance floor, singing to the people, real people. His footsteps and those of the journalists rang out of the marble, an energetic echo. They are inside the palace of the boss, of the king, so they are going to meet him. An energetic echo. The artist spouted off under his breath, and as the marble sped by the underfoot, he got madder and madder, and surer of himself, as if the answer lay waiting at the end of the hall, in the gallery. "Here we are," said the journalist. People lined up, coming in through a big door, in shawls and tattered trousers, carrying kids, their faces blank with shining slightly with faith. The gallery was a controlled chaos, alarmed yet deferential, and smelled of dirt and salt, and a kind of curdled heat. "Where were you?" demanded the jeweler the second he saw him walk in. "Don't you know what today is?" The artist didn't know, and felt ashamed since he saw that somehow it was his duty to know. For as soon as he entered and sensed the atmosphere, he got goosebumps and suspected that he was not alone in his anger, that his anger was incarnate. "Every month there's an audience," the jeweler explained, "and you have to be present for whatever might arise. Some are only looking for meds or a job or payback, but for others, he changes their lives with some little thing, Senor as their baby's godfather or helping out with a quinceañera. He grants things to them all. And what was he supposed to do if someone asked for a corrido?" The artist nodded. suddenly both guilty and excited at the scene. The crowd at the back was a blur, an indistinct mass of grey, but he could clearly see those almost at the front of the line, who stood straight, tucked their hair to the side, kept quiet, did a bottom. And at the head, surrounded by the court, the king looked them each in the eye, listened to the favor requested, motioned to the manager, and the manager made a note. Some he stroked their hair or counsel in a grave tone of voice. Then they wanted to kiss his hand or embrace his knees, and the king allowed them to adore him for a moment before casting them off with gentle force. The jeweler, too, was dazzled by the audience. He, so fine, seemed to flourish at the passion expressed by the simple. Outside, he likely would have looked straight through them, but here he didn't miss a trick when it came to seeing that Senor worked miracles, and they were transformed. "That's why we are here," said the jeweler, "to give him power. By ourselves, what good is any of us? None at all. But in here, with him, with his blood, we are strong. And let no one think they can take anything from Senor." The jeweler was almost shouting by the end, and the people cowered for a second until the journalist slapped him in the back. "Easy, tiger, easy now." The artist tried to distract the jeweler by asking, "Do you ever make special pieces for the people?" "All my pieces are special," he replied, "and all the special pieces you see here were made by me." For a second, the artist thought the journalist and the jeweler exchanged a look of surprise, or that the journalist was about to fly off the handle. But it was only for an instant, because then the audience ended. The king rose and strode toward the hall, the people spreading looks trickling down to his feet. Behind him, the manager consoled those still in line. Next month. "Come on," said the journalist. They rushed to the back of the royal entourage, and the journalist approached the king. "Senor, it seems we have a problem with the artist." The king stopped, arched an eyebrow. "Well, not with the artist. What problem would we have with him?" The journalist grinned. "It's the DJs who have the problem. They won't play his songs." "Oh? And why's that?" said the king, as if to say, "What's new?" "Same old story. They mustn't be seen speaking well of you to the people." The king glanced back toward the gallery, to where people were heading home, laden with favors. "As if we need those asses in order for people to speak of me," he said. "Don't you worry about it. The manager here will arrange things with our friends to move your music on the street. After all, isn't that the way we do business?" The king looked tired, but also full of restrained power. He smiled, and his smile seemed a protective embrace that said to the artist, "Why sugarcoat the ears of those fuckers? We know what we are, and we are good with it. Let them be scared. Let the decent take offense. Put them to shame. Why else be an artist?" Okay, so just gonna read one last scene that is also a conversation he's having with the journalist about his work. "So tell me, how you write a corrido?" the journalist said. "You just told the story, that's all?" The artist knew how, but had never articulated it. Expertise was like underwear, something concealed out of modesty that you were almost unaware of. And yet, now he felt confident enough to expound. "The story tells itself, but you have to coax it," he replied. "You take one or two words, and the others revolve around them. That's what holds it up. Because if you are just saying what happened, why bother with a song? Corridos aren't only true, they are also beautiful and just. That's why they are so right for honoring Senor." The journalist nodded, but seemed unconvinced. They were on the terrace having coffee. The artist was enjoying their chat, so unlike the shakedown soon to come, he was mastering more and more words thanks to the books the journalist had given him and refused to take back, even when the artist insisted. "That's good," the journalist said. "That's good for us, the ones who polish his shoes and watch his back, but you're something else. Not saying you don't mean it, But what you do is art, amigo. No need to use all your words and praise on Señor. Why not? I write about what moves me, and if what moves me are the things that the chief does, then why not? Sure. Don't get me wrong, artist. All I mean is that your thing has a life of its own, one that doesn't depend on all this. It's good that our hell-raising serves as inspiration. I just hope you never have to choose. Seems to me like you're a pure passion, and if one day you have to choose between your passion and your obligation, artist, then you're truly fucked. He felt the journalist was plucking a cord he's been hoping to keep quiet. So, cautious, he responded in a way that both concurred and offered resistance. My songs will outlive me in the end. The door to the room at the far end opened, and there appeared the witch. Her long white dress made the blood on her fingertips jump out. The whole of her tense, as though her entire body were a loaded gun. "What are you doing here?" she spat. "Don't you have any place else to waste your time? Think you'll learn something here? Digging in like nits? Asswipes, pays off. Damn, you get out of here. There's nothing to see." The journalist motioned vaguely and stood. The artist got out of his chair, still bent almost double, frightened because unlike the majority of the palace bigwigs, the witch had looked straight at him, and her eyes burned. They headed for the guards' dining room, in silence at first, and then the journalist, as though feeling the need to apologize to a guest, confided, "Not so long ago, we were all tight, like family. But now, well, they say the alliance with that other boss fell through. Plus, there's this war on the horizon. But can't you go with them, try to set things straight?" "Not me, a subordinate, no. There are those who can address the king, but I'm not the kind to jump my station." Somberly he added, "Though some are artists, that's that for damn sure. There's that fool struck out on his own, or found himself a new boss. I'm starting to see." In the dining room, they ran into the heir, who stood grabbing pieces of raw meat from a long platter. He glanced up at the new arrivals from the far end of the long table, eyed them quickly, but said nothing. The heir brought pieces of meat to his mouth greedily, but with the slow self-assurance of a man who knows no one is going to fight him for a mouthful. They sat at the opposite end of the table, as if to carry on with their conversation, but now said not a word. Well, thank you.